Hi everybody and welcome to another Gaffering Gear. Today we're going to do a very quick follow-up on my review about 6 months ago on the Nunlite Forza 500, and we're also going to take a look at the Fresnel Mount. Alright, so before we have a look at the Fresnel Mount, just some follow-up answers to questions that people have asked me about the Forza 500 since I reviewed it. Now, when I reviewed it, I had a prototype lamp head and a prototype controller, and one of the problems was the fan noise. The fan was incredibly loud down here, stupidly loud. You couldn't use it. Now, as you can hear, they've sorted that out. It's not very loud at all. It's not running silent, I will say, but it's very, very quiet. And bear in mind that I'm wearing a microphone standing right next to it, and I've got the controller up high, so it's really close to the microphone. So we're being incredibly stupid here in how we're capturing our sound. Now, to give you some idea of the noise now in the transformers, I'm going to turn the fan off in the head, so it's just the transformer noise. Let's have a listen. Okay, so that's just the transformer noise now. So as you can hear, it's very quiet. They've sorted that out. So a few people have said to me that they've gone out and bought these, and they're a bit upset that there is a bit of noise here. Look, again, I think I said it in the initial video, this is a 1.2K HMI equivalent. If this was a 1.2K HMI, it would be a lot noisier. Now, if you've bought one of these and it is incredibly noisy, chances are you've got the old transformer. So how you check is the new transformer has a fan in the top and bottom. The old transformer only has one fan. If you've got the old transformer, they'll switch it out for you. Now, the next question I get asked is, do they supply a longer head lead now? Because in the review, I think we only had a 2-meter head lead. You can get a 5-meter head lead, so that's awesome. And the next question a lot of people ask me is, have I had any problems with the lights? Now, I own 5 of them, and yes, I have had problems. Now, to put that into some perspective, I have problems with every single brand of light I buy because I'm an industrial user. I flog the gear. So problems I've had with these, one problem I've had is, pretty much I've only had the one problem actually, is one of the cooling fans had a bad bearing in it. So the fan got a bit loud after about 6 hours of continuous runtime. That's about the only fault I've had. The other problem I've had is if you're running them and you're tilting them up, say bouncing it off a roof, if you get a moth fly and land into it, they burn into the protective coating over the cob. So be very cautious using these pointing upwards when you've got moths around. That's about it. Oh yes, another fault, not a fault, but it is possible for people not to plug this cable in properly, just to have it sitting very loosely contacted. And if they do that, basically the light can turn on, but the fan doesn't operate. So the unit will eventually shut down when it overheats, the thermostat will kick in. But I tell you what, you could fry an egg up here. So that's something to watch out for. Make sure you hear the click when you plug it in. But apart from those things, that's it. It's been a pretty dependable unit. And these are a workhorse, man. I flog these. All right, so now let's get into talking about the Fresnel mount. And the first thing a lot of you are going to notice is that it is humongous. It's quite big. Now, a lot of Bowens mount Fresnels are quite tiny. And here's the problem with a tiny lens. Basically, the cob, the light emitter, isn't that much smaller than the lens. So what happens is the cob emitter basically, if the size is wrong, it basically floods the whole lens instead of using the rings to help you get your optical control. So with units like that, basically all they can do is basically act like an intensifier, basically give you more light level. And if you spot them up, they give you a circle on your background. That's basically all they do. Whereas a unit like this, where you've got the cob, the correct size in relation to the lens, actually gives you some focal control. So what I mean by that is, I'll just turn around, here we go, is I've actually got barn door control with this. I can barn door slash, okay? So that's something you can't do with a lot of other Bowens mount Fresnels. So in terms of the optical qualities that you get here, I would compare this pretty much to a 1.2K HMI Fresnel. I think that's a really, really good unit as an example. Number one is the brightness. This is actually brighter than a 1.2K HMI Fresnel. We're not talking too much brighter, maybe about somewhere like 6-12%. I can't give you an exact comparison because when I got a prototype lens in to have a look at, the first thing I did was I sold my HMI Fresnels. I got rid of them real quick because this was brighter. So it is brighter, not a huge amount, so I'd say about the same. But optically, it really is on a par with a 1.2K HMI Fresnel. It's not crisp and sharp like the 575 with the smaller Fresnel, but you know, it's about the same optical quality. So anything that you were used to doing with a 1.2K HMI Fresnel, you can do with this. So things like putting it through a cookie, for example, no problems at all. So basically the same optical quality. So that's pretty good. Now, before we go any further, something that's worth pointing out is, yes, this is a Bowens mount, but I wouldn't go putting it on other Bowens mount lights. Forza 300, Forza 500, yes, I wouldn't put it on anything else. Not unless you can test it before you buy it. Now, to give you an example, this doesn't fit on a Aperture 300D Mark II. It literally doesn't fit onto the connector. I think the 300, the cob sticks out a little bit further than the cob on this, so it doesn't make the connection, it doesn't make the mount. The other thing too is, you know, this is optically aligned for this cob. So if it does fit, chances are it might not work all that well. It might be muddy, it might be more spotty, it might be more floody. Who can tell? So basically my advice is if you've got something other than a Forza 300 or a Forza 500, I wouldn't buy this and put it on unless you test it first. Now, the next thing to point out is this one is white. As you can see here, it's white. The one for the 300 only is black. Now, the reason they went with white is because black absorbs heat, and apparently when they put the initial one onto the 500, it was overheating. So what I'm guessing would have happened is the black material would have expanded and probably jammed up the flood spot mechanism. Now, in terms of the flood spot range, it's 45 degrees is your flood, and a lot of other lights out there claim a 45 degrees, but when I put them side by side with this is actually wider, so it's quite interesting that. I won't mention other brands. And this thing, you spot it by rotating. Now, a lot of people have said that it floods out to 10 degrees, okay, so, spots into 10 degrees. Now, 10 degrees is the last mark there, but it actually goes in tighter than 10 degrees. So let's fire up and have a look. Okay, so it's way tighter than a 10-degree beam, okay, and floods all the way out to 45. All right, so let's give you some stats on this thing. Okay, so the lens increases the light output from the cob by 2.4 times. Okay, so if you've got this as a raw cob and then put the Fresnel on, you get 2.4 times more light. Now, to put that in some sort of perspective, if you own a Forza 500, the lens gives you 82% of the light level you would get out of the reflector and flood. So basically, yeah, 82% the light level of this. And that's basically because the reflector here is so awesomely made. It's so precisionally aligned to the cob. That takes a bit of beating. So I pretty much use this when I need the light to be lightweight, like if it's going way up on a tall stand, or if it's going out on a boom arm, I'll use this. But the rest of the time, the Fresnel is my go-to attachment because it just gives me so much more versatility. Okay, so let's get into things that I don't like about this, things that are negatives for me. Okay, first off is these gaps here. Okay, you get a lot of spill light coming through there. So if you're going to buy this, you're going to have to invest in a roll of cinefoil. Okay, so let's have a look at just how much spill light we get coming through that gap. All right, so as you can see there on the back wall, there's quite a bit of light coming through those gaps. Okay, so that is somewhat irritating. Now, you also get a lot of spill light coming out the ventilation in the back. Okay, now this hasn't been a problem for me because the firepower of this unit, this isn't something that I stick on a C-stand arm and use as a backlight where the light coming out the back could contaminate the set. This is something that I have on the outside of the set punching light in because of its firepower. But to give you some idea of how much light comes through the vents, I'm going to do something very stupid that you should never do. I'm going to close the barn doors up, and then turn the light on with it facing away so you can see just how much light comes out the back and hits me. So let's have a look. So there is quite a bit of spill light coming out of the back of the lens. Whether that affects you or not depends on your situation, but I found it doesn't affect me one bit. Now there is something that really irritates me with these, and it's that old expression, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. So one of the problems I had when I sold my HMI Fresnels, my 200s, 400s, 575s and 1.2s and replaced them with these, is no wire kits. And I'm really surprised how often I use a half wire. So one problem with this is there's nowhere to mount a wire kit. So that's irritating. So I'm currently using bits of gel and stuff like that. So that's an irritation I could have done without. Okay, now let's get into having a look at the optical quality. So first off, I'll box it in and have a look at stray light coming off the beam. So we do have a bit. So the same as you would with a HMI Fresnel or a HMI tungsten. So I've got the beam that's direct beam on the light stand there, but if I take it just off, you'll see we've got two shadows. So one shadow, the harder shadow, is from the lens itself, and the second shadow, the softer shadow, is a reflection off the barn doors. Now let's have a look at the beam. Okay, so I'll get right on the edge of the beam. So right on the edge of the beam there where the reflection, the shadow of the stand is, there is a bit of CCT fringing, so that's pretty normal on HMIs, so that still happens on these. But as you can see, the shadow consistency is pretty even throughout the beam. So look, pretty much what I've got to say about this is, if you're happy with a 1.2K HMI Fresnel, this is pretty much its LED replacement as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so anyway, that's the non-light Fresnels. Catch you on the next episode of Gaffer and Gear.